Now it started.
Yeah? Okay.
now
Hi,
it started.
we are live. So, uh, welcome to Ollie's Roundtable. And this is the first one that we are hosting out of Bangalore, so we are very happy to be here. The subject is small data, big insights. How do big ideas work in an analytics-driven world? Or will big data kill the creative process? Now, just to clarify right at the outset, this is not a fight between big or small. It's just to explore whether technology and intuition can work in a complementary fashion. Now, for today's discussion, we have four very eminent practitioners from diverse fields like analytics, the digital world, communication, strategy. And what makes them so suitable for today's conversation is not so much their professional credentials, which I think once you know their names, most of you will know who or what they do, or you can go to the website and it's all there. But more importantly, the eclectic mix of their personal life interest is what kind of, I think, brought us together to have this discussion. But before I introduce them, a brief about how I intend to we will conduct this session. The format will be that a particular subject or point of the topic will be raised and addressed to a specific speaker who, after she or he has spoken, it's open to the rest of the panel to take it on and explore it as they wish it. So in all, we have about 4 or 5 points that we will discuss, and hopefully with the comments coming in, we'll be able to elaborate on that. So without much further ado, let's starting with Nandita Kathuria. She's a principal consultant at ISIS Consulting. She comes from a research background, and the first thing that comes to her mind, research, number cruncher. No, she is much beyond that. She's a yoga therapist, a mind reader, animal lover, and pet accessory entrepreneur. Her experience in advertising, coupled with her ability to understand people and mind insights, brings the consumer's voice to the forefront of any business or brand decision. So that's Nandita. Then we have Reese Rufus, who's head of the digital services at Celsius 100. Now, very, very interesting person, gamer, biker, baller, and digital native. Has an insatiable curiosity for technology, innovation, balanced with what makes people tick. And I think that's what makes him so appropriate for today's conversation. He is motivated to find creative solutions to marketing problems and driven to see them executed. But beware, he doesn't believe in small talk. Okay? Amin Haq, in front of me, founder of Storywala, which is a storytelling training organization which believes that stories are the best way to inspire, engage, and teach. So who could we have better than Amin to join the gang? He's also a harmonica player. Do you play the blues?
Indian music.
Good old Hindi film songs?
Yeah.
Lovely. So harmonica player, story coach, innovation consultant. Uses the power of stories as a means of defining brands and enhancing businesses. His experience as an exceptional advertising planner makes his approach to marketing solutions unique. And last but definitely not the least is our very own SG, Shubhabrata Ghosh, or also known as Mr. Walker. He is the sage of this group. So, we treat him with a bit of extra added respect. He's also the founder and CEO of Celsius 100, a believer in radical innovation to break the monotony of similarity, e-evangelist, audiophile, tech enthusiast, and also a self-proclaimed alternative medical practitioner. Mr. Walker, as he is popularly known amongst his near and dear ones, has played many roles, and it shows in his approach to business, ideation, and strategy. One more person who's not here, but I think we need to mention him, is Sujit Sanal, the spirit behind Ollie's Adda and the round tables, has a key role today. He's sitting in a different location altogether and curating all the comments that are going to come in and direct it towards us so that we can take it up with the speaker. So starting with Nandita,
A line or two about you, Manoj.
well, Monotosh Sengupta. Yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, I'm
I mean,
from
you
a
don't
certain
have to be
family.
so apologetic. You all know I
They're just here.
No, I think most of the audience crowd from old Calcutta will know me as Sputnik. So I'm that puppy.
It's an interesting story behind that Sputnik.
The
That's for
first
another day.
spacecraft.
So no, terms like big data, AI, analytics, and now small data have suddenly become buzzwords. So in our time, as I mentioned, what is possibly small data today was insight mining. So let's start with understanding data. It's big and small, etc. Can you give us a perspective?
Sure. Let me begin, just dive into this whole thing by asking you all a few questions. How many of us, say, get onto a treadmill and get off the treadmill only when the calorie marker or the timer shows a whole rounded number? How many of us, while we are waiting in the pub or a cafe for somebody to come, and we've been, not stood up, but we're waiting for some time, we don't want to look like a loser, bury our head into the phone so that, we come across as being busy. How many of us say, we're getting late for a meeting and want to follow a clock that shows a better time? So these are little observations, little bits about human behavior. And these little bits of human behavior is nothing other than small data. This is really what we're talking about. When we talk about small data, this is what we're talking about. Coming back to what you mentioned, that, good old days, it was insight mining, consumer insights. I completely agree with that. I mean, it's not about old wine in a new bottle. It's about a new context. The new context is all about big data. So in context to that, when we talk about small data, it puts things in perspective and we can address that. Having said that, what is big data? Big data is, as the name suggests, mammoth amounts of data, which is computationally analyzed, to give rise to patterns and associations and trends to predict all of that. So really, when we're looking at small data versus big data, I would like to illustrate it with the help of an example, which I think best captures really what is small data and what is big data. One of my favorite examples. It is to do with Lego, early 2000s, when Lego was losing market share, had lost almost 30% of their market share. Reason being obvious, children moving from physical play to digital play, computer games, PlayStation, Nintendo, and such like. So they were losing interest in physical play, so that being one of the reasons why Lego was losing share. Big data threw up two interesting findings about children. One is the children nowadays want instant gratification. They don't have the patience to actually sit and put together these kind of things. And second is with this whole new medium of digital, where to a great extent the creativity and the thinking is already done by the other at the other end. So these were the reasons why the children were just moving away from that. That's what big data was throwing up, and Lego was in the process of almost dumbing down their blocks from small tiny blocks to having bigger building blocks. So something that would perhaps take 2 days to make would now take a couple of hours. So they were in the process of that before step in small data, and something very interesting happened in the home of an 11-year-old German boy. And when the researchers entered, and they just asked him one question, and that was, what is that one thing that you're really proud of? And this kid turned around and he pointed to his old pair of Adidas sneakers, and he said, that is what I am most proud of. Anyway, the backstory to that was, this kid was a passionate skateboarder, and the sole of the Adidas shoe was, it had those rivets and corroded in just the places where an expert skateboarder would, probably hit the ground while skateboarding. And he said, this is what I am most proud of, because it just shows that I am an expert and I do this really well. And voila, that was the turnaround for Lego, because the insight over there was that it's not about patience, it's not about instant gratification. what it was all about at the end of the day is that the kids want to acquire a skill, they want to master it, they want to showcase it, they want to have something to show what they are all about. And in fact, that is when Lego turned around, and instead of having bigger blocks, they went down to even having smaller blocks added on to their entire thing. And in the decade that followed, it went on to be the #1 toy company, overtaking Mattel. So I think this example kind of highlights really what a small data, big data is. Having said that, as we get into the discussion, what I would like to say at this point is that both have their own place. So it's not about, like you rightly said, it's not about small data versus the big data. It's about utilizing the right methodology at the right time.
So if I can go on to the next point, and this will be for SG. The example that Nandita gave is all about how small data helps you to discover a big idea, or is the path to a big idea. So over here, first and foremost, we hear this term, big idea, big idea. What is a big idea? I mean, how does it matter? Why can't it be just an advertising line? The second thing is that, today, you and I, when you first met to kind of decide on the subject, the topic, etc., as you brought this up, that how the consumer experience has become so widespread. I don't know whether it's fragmented, but it's definitely, and everywhere they're going, live, work, play, they're looking at some kind of a touch point to have some kind of a brand experience. Now, is it possible for a big idea in such a fragmented world, whether you look at it media specific or you look at our own life, to sustain itself across? So what is a big idea? How does it work across in the current scenario?
See, I think these are new terminologies which are floating around, and people have some, they don't have clarity of understanding what this means. It's not that big data did not exist. It's not that big ideas did not exist. It's not that small data did not exist, but it existed in some other form. Number one. Number two is a big idea is not necessarily an advertising campaign. Right? A big idea translates right across the entire value chain, which is manifest through the product, through the way it is distributed, through the way it is consumed, through the way it is sold, everything. Just to give an example, when Steve Jobs in 2007 launched the smartphone, that was a big idea. It changed our lives, right? So, what do you call a big idea? Do you call a big idea, in our realm that we kind of working, which is communication? Is it a big idea that people just love watching? Like I remember when I joined advertising, Viril was a big idea. Everybody wanted, people used to go and buy a cinema hall ticket just to go and see that commercial, right? Few days ago, not few days ago, I think last year, one of my ex-colleagues, Sagar, he made a film for Samsung, which is about service, right? How our service reaches remote parts no matter where you live. And the context in which he set it was a blind school, right? That commercial, which is a 3-minute commercial, I think logged in the highest number of viewers ever for any YouTube video, right? You take, for example, the one that Google made about Jhajariya chura ke khate the, which is, two old guys, one in Delhi and the other in Lahore. So I think, this, we get caught in what is a big idea. I think a big idea is something that basically ignites the imagination of consumers, right? Either to consume the communication or to consume the product, or in the best case, consume both. To me, that is really a big idea, right? Sometimes the brand is the advertising, right? And for example, if you take Coca-Cola, the brand is the product. I mean, if I take out the product out of the bottle and give you thumbs up, Pepsi and Coke, you can't distinguish. It's like Bisleri water versus Kinley water versus any other water. So your brand is the product. In that case, your communication, right, which basically exposes the brand to everyone, that becomes the big idea. And therefore there you need. Now, do we all the time get big ideas? I mean, all of us have worked on multiple number of brands. It's rarely that you will get a really big idea that will change the way people live their lives. Right? The smartphone changed the way people live their lives. The bottled water, Bisleri changed our lives. So I want to tell a little story about a product which I think changed that category. Okay, and this happened sometime in the late 90s. Oh no, late 80s. Tata Tea they had launched a pouch pack, right? In a market which was dominated by carton packs, right? So you had, the big daddy of that market was Red Label, and we had done the campaign with Amjad, which is basically a very logical campaign which says pick, packed and sealed in the garden, therefore the tea is very fresh, and they didn't make much headway. So when I started working on the business, Mr. Krishna Kumar, who was that time the marketing director of the company.
Sorry, just a little louder. That's the feeling.
Okay. So Mr. Krishna Kumar was the marketing director of the company Tata Tea. So he asked me, we have the best product, we have the freshest tea. When you want to drink tea, you want fresh tea, but nobody's buying it. So I said, I don't have an answer to this. And to find an answer, you have to give me 2-3 months. He jumped out of his chair and said, 2-3 months?
That's it.
So I said, yeah, it'll take me 2-3 months. So instead of giving it to a research agency to find what is going on, I decided to go around the market. And basically I went and met people who drink. See, tea drinking is a habit, and your brain is programmed in such a way, it's very difficult to change your habit. So I went from one part of the country to the other, trying to figure out, something, looking for gold. I landed up in Lucknow. And I went to this old lady's house, somewhere near Hazratganj. And as I was chatting with her, and I asked her, her habit of drinking tea, how do they make tea, like the Dekchi method and the boiling method, etc., etc. And then we sort of went down to brand, and then I said, अच्छा हमारी भूल गए कि अगर Red Label बाजार में नहीं होता तो क्या होगा? She looked at me in complete surprise. ऐसा हो ही नहीं सकता. ऐसे क्यों? क्योंकि Red Label का साथ तो माँ बेटी के रिश्ता. I ended the research there. That was the piece of information that I wanted. That we were positioning the brand against Red Label. Was it possible to knock Red Label off the perch? Right? That is the information that you needed. And if so, what you needed to do. So the first thing that you need to find out is what is the relationship between Red Label and the consumer. It is a familial relationship. You can't get stronger than that. It is like father, mother, daughter, etc. It's a familial relationship. Don't go there. Don't go and knock yourself, against the wall. That gave rise to a campaign which was completely different from pick, pack, seed in the garden to Annu Tazgi Devi. After that, everything else is history. Right? Which is it addressed a completely different audience, with whom Red Label didn't have a relationship. People who are coming into regular tea drinking, it's a much more younger audience, etc. It was a small piece of information. It was a small, tiny, it's a nugget of a conversation. And it was not some statistically validated, chi-square test, t-test validated data. It was an old lady telling me the truth.
Conversation.
It is the truth. Then, essentially Insight Mining is about finding the truth. And when you find the truth, and then you come back, and then you put that truth on the table, and then say, how are you going to address this new group of people? When you look at what is their life context, and then you look at what moves them, film moves them, songs move them, stars move them, and how do you create an environment in which there is, tea drinking is like, it's not a private thing, it's a community thing. So all tea ads those days basically look the same. two people sitting around a table and having tea, where tea is to be consumed. This was completely different. This was shot in a warehouse with hundreds of people, and people as if cheers to drinking. That was the spirit. That was the spirit of the young people, right? And when we captured that in an interesting way, that is what created the right.
Yeah, I actually quite empathize with this coming from Kolkata. I mean, the chai adda.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's all become cafes and whatever.
Pubs.
Pubs. But in our days there were no such fancy places, and on the rocket adda and all that stuff.
Yeah, it was a nukkad, tea shop, having tea in a cooler.
Yeah. And he knew exactly what the group's preference was.
Yeah.
In a way, it kind of also reminds me of the relationship Horlicks had with maybe Tamil Nadu. I believe, I've never worked on Horlicks, but I mean, I used to hear during my agency days, the team that was handling it, that when you go to that particular state or maybe regions within that state, they don't offer you water or anything, tea. It's always Horlicks. And Horlicks, irrespective of your age, gender, whatever demographics, was the kind of delivery or drink. So anyway, now, what we heard from SG, coming to you, how do you bridge the gap between data and story? For instance, today we talk about digital advertising. Why should there be a digital advertising? I mean, whether it's advertising and the same messaging, maybe in different, whether it's a static ad or a poster or a WhatsApp push or a film, can cut across anything. So why do we specifically, what's so great about digital advertising, digital being the operator?
So here's the thing is,
Okay.
so the way we go about, whether it is pulling out insights or whether it is executing on a big idea, the skills and the expertise and the experience that we draw on are essentially the same. But the difference is now there is so much of information that is being collected at so many different touch points. Yeah? Till now you've used, you rely on a form or a survey to get information, which is kind of people's projected data, which is when you ask someone, say you went and you ask them, every night how many drinks do you have? It's socially acceptable to say, 1 or 2. If someone has 5 or 8, they're not going to say that in a survey. But in digital, because you're pulling this information from Google, you're pulling this information from Facebook, where unless you're putting in, you're asking the question that you want a result for, you're not getting that result. So the information is a lot more accurate. It's a lot more telling. You still need the skills to interpret that and derive the insight out of it, but the information is a lot more accurate. The second thing is there's so much more because everyone's doing it. It's not a sample set anymore. You're looking at your actual customers. And the thing about it is it's growing because the touch points are growing. Today we're using laptops and mobile phones. Tomorrow it's going to be cars. Soon it's going to be your appliances. Then it's going to be the lighting in your home. So the information that you're collecting about your consumers and about their lives is going to be so much more. So the level of insights that you can draw is going to be phenomenally more. The other side of that is the way media works is before we had, we relied on press and TV and you kind of got a sample set of how did your ad perform. You looked at sales and you got that information. Now you can see if someone's watching a video, how much have they watched, what part of it did they find interesting, when did they tune out. So the second part of it is you get a lot of information from there that you can actually weave into your marketing campaigns. There are, a lot of campaigns that actually use that as part of the big idea. Where, like, for example, there was a Deadpool, I think when they launched their DVD, their whole marketing campaign was designed based on what was the action you took when you saw the first video. According to that, you saw a second video. So if you watched the video, there was option A. If you didn't watch the video, there was option B. If you went ahead and bought, there was probably, so it was an algorithm that looked at, how did people react to this idea, and then therefore how do we take the next step to convince them. The level of data that we're getting is, a couple of weeks ago we were sitting with Google and they were saying that we can actually track your customers who've seen your ad and then come to your store, and what have they done in your store? Did they spend a minute there? Did they spend 5 minutes there? So there's all this information that is available. It affects, the insights that you pull. It affects how you actually execute on that big idea. I think the challenge that we face is the rate at which we're getting this information is immense. So there's not enough time to actually learn how do you deal with this information. Companies are struggling with, if I've got all this information, but now how do I analyze it? How do I make sense of it? How do I, then feed it to my ad agency or my strategy agency to figure out what to do with it? On the flip side of it, the formats that we're getting are so, they're evolving so fast. A few years ago, Google had, YouTube had, one or two formats. Now they've got about 10. So learning how to cope with that data on both sides of it is also a challenge, and it's something that as marketers we need to start paying attention to. We need to educate ourselves. We need to familiarize ourselves with what works and what doesn't work. I think that's where this connection between when we say big data and why it's such a big scary word, and actually the communication side of it, the idea side of it needs to kind of move around and get used to.
Just in a naughty way, I was saying that big data gives us so much of information that we don't know what to do. It kind of reminded me of these people who bought a lot of stuff, money in their banks, and they don't know what to do with it. But I don't think they're unhappy about that. But coming back to the point,
can I just add something to what you were saying? See, there are two interesting things which have happened in the last 25 years. One is the growth of digital technology across everything that we do, that is working both ways, which is sensor driven. Currently, as per whatever count, there are about 14.5 trillion sensors available in the market. So for example, your smartphone, any smartphone that you use, would have at least 25 sensors, right? We are quickly getting into a world which is going to be driven by IoT. For example, you can see Alexa controlling, which is voice controlled, being used for devices, right? Each and every device is essentially IP addressable, which is I know who is logged in. The moment I know who is logged in, I can trace that person, trace the location of that person, know how long that person has been on that inside a particular room, or using a particular machine, or consuming some media content, etc., etc. Which is every moment of your life can be tracked, right? And it can be tracked in different dimensions. It can be tracked on time, it can be tracked by activity, and it can also be tracked by intensity of that activity. Now, all this data is constantly being generated. Nobody is collecting the data except the cloud through which all this data is being sort of handed over to us. Now that I work on both sides of the table, which is both on the client side and as well as the agency side, I can see that the agency side actually has fallen way back compared to where Google is or where Facebook is, or any of these big, or Apple is. There is companies which have enormous amount. Amazon must be sitting on data which is unbelievable. It is the largest cloud that exists. When they give you the data, you don't know what to do with it, because that data can be skinned in any which way you want. The kind of people that are required for actually taking advantage of that data is not available, because things have moved so fast that we didn't have that culture where people have kind of been using this the way they have been using intuition, right, when all this did not exist. I think that is where the challenge is. The challenge is that when you listen to a Google presentation, Google will dictate. The first 3 seconds, if your brand name did not appear, then you've lost part of the consumer. In 6 seconds, if your proposition did not arrive, then you lost part of the consumer. When you listen to this, and then you sort of step back and think, So did we change as human beings? Has our human brain changed? Do we listen to stories like this? Is there something called tone and manner in which you tell the story? Is there changes in voice? एक ज़माना था, तब क्या हुआ? Right? I think we are getting caught in between two things. One is we have now got very, very sharp data on behavior, how people behave, and the intensity and the expanse of that behavior across large number of products is confusing the daylights out of people. But we are also losing sight of the fact that the human brain has not changed. The way we learn and the way we consume has not changed. I'll give you a parallel example, which is diametrically opposite to what these people say. Never in the history of mankind has binge watching on Netflix been so high. People are watching for 8 hours, 10 hours. Why are they watching? Because it's an interesting story. So my question is very simple. Have all this big data, small data. Can you create a really, really interesting story that everybody would like to listen to? Right? I mean, if you go and ask people, which is the most popular sort of ad going around, I think I would tell you two. क्या चल रहा है? Fog ही चल रहा है. Is it increasing the sale of fog? I'm sure it will. It is because mind share has a relationship to market share. And the other is Gubluk. चाचू बहुत मजा करते हो. Waste क्यों करते हो? In phone पे.
Waste क्यों करते हो? Right, that looks any Indian.
No, what are you responding to?
Yes.
You are responding to characters. You are responding to interactions. You are responding to the setting. Have we lost on this big data attack and this data attack that we have on our brains? Have we lost sight of that? Right? When is the last time you saw a really fantastically written ad? And if people tell me that nowadays nobody reads, do you know something? Never in the history of mankind has so many books been sold as it is being sold today. And you are telling me that people don't read? They actually read much more. They may not be reading on paper.
Yeah.
They may be reading digitally. They may be reading on the Kindle, but they read much more. But the point is, we are creating crap content. If you just see the amount of crap content which is going around, then you ask, have we lost the people who could write brilliantly?
No, I just kind of come in. There's a feedback from Sudip Madhav.
Yeah.
And I think the point he's raised has been very well articulated by three of you, and you just kind of put it all together. The sense I'm getting is that big data tracks behavior, small data unearths beliefs, while talking to individual gaining insights. Yeah, I mean, so I think if Sudeep is watching us, I think we've kind of discussed that, and if you have any further addition to what you wish to say, you can kind of message us and we'll definitely explore it.
Can I address that for a minute? So this SG talked about Netflix, and Netflix brought to mind that I believe that Netflix is one of the best examples of a brand, of a company which has straddled both big data and small data. I mean, with their big data, the viewership activity, the habits, the genres, content development, fantastic. It is rumored that Netflix, before they launched in India, they converted one of their conference rooms for 14 days into mini India. Is rumored, right? So I'm saying Netflix is one of those fantastic companies who's managed, to utilize, as Reese pointed out, there's so much of information, and if we don't know how to utilize that information, it leaves us with nothing. So I think Netflix is a fine example of that. And to answer what he was saying is, behavior can be tapped by both, whether it's big data or small data. There's no line where, small data finishes and big data begins, or vice versa. Yeah. So it just depends on, when, what.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, if I may, before I coming to Amin, I've had this, I sometimes give a talk here and there, and I've been talking about how do we, will the AI make human species redundant? And my counter to that, AI versus NI, natural intelligence or empathy quotient. So unless you have a sense of your own humaneness, you will always be led by just the data, the quantum of it, never the depth. So coming to you, I was reading an article by McKinsey yesterday, which kind of spoke about, because the article headline attracted me. 73% of people who are on, get into some kind of digital platform or the other, find ads very, very intrusive, and they immediately block it off. And therefore, carrying on from what they said, there is a difference between passing on just information and then entrapping you with a sense of empathy, the stories, the values, the systems. So as a storyteller, there are two things I would like to pose to you. One is from storytelling to story living, because we've become very, very experiential in our demands. The second is sensory branding. I mean, it's quite interesting that sensory or brand sense was kind of propounded as a concept by Martin Lindstrom in 2005 or something like that, I forgot which year. But as a result of the evolution from just narrating to living, a lot of the senses come into play, and the brands are taking kind of apparently a lot of umbrage under that. So the expert, the guru speaks, the storyteller.
Well, there are two ways to look at it. It's an interesting question, and there are two parts to this. The first part is that that point you made about 73% people online blocking away ads. A large part of them are also people who are forwarding stories on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So while you block out some stories which are intrusive, you are the same person who forwards these stories that you found very interesting to other people who you would like to share them with. Like Marshall McLuhan said about media, and one can extrapolate from media to many other things, that nothing goes away. It just redefines the new, and the new redefines the old. Similarly, for every dominant trend in any era, there will be an emergence of a counter trend. And the big data, small data can be viewed through the same lens. To give an analogy, or a metaphor, the rise of digital in music and programming in music makes us crave for the unplugged and the raw.
Absolutely. Wow.
So if you have to look at why is it that there is a huge revival in storytelling, in the raw, natural form, including oral storytelling, and why we crave for 3-minute films, the overdoing of format, data, 3 seconds, this must be available, the branding is making us crave for the unplugged version of storytelling. We're saying, can you give me the raw? And there could be no better example than some of the brands that we have mentioned. The company that sits on the biggest amounts of data, Google, tells a human story of an old man in India and an old man in Pakistan, coming together. Or a company like Netflix, which has the largest amounts of data accessible to itself, using that to create stories. There are two examples that come to my mind in terms of big ideas, since we are discussing big ideas, and you also mentioned living the story.
Yeah.
I'd like to move away from the narrow confines of the way we look at brand, and look at an organization brand connecting with its customers or employees. You know this recently that in India, Government of India made it mandatory for organizations to offer 6 months mandatory maternity leave. But there are a couple of organizations who did that before the government made it mandatory. Sounds illogical. Why would you offer 6 months leave even before the government makes it mandatory? Now there's a very large IT firm which has about 1,80,000 to 2 lakh employees on its payrolls. It's a very large company. That could be more than the number of Parsis in India. Just to give you a sense of perspective. Yeah, and let's assume that there are 30% number of women employees on their diversity journey. So 2 lakh at 30%. At 60,000, India is a country of young people. 70% population below age 35, and therefore largely these 30,000 women are between age of 24 and 35. Let's assume that 50% of them, number of married is extremely high in India, the pressure on marriage, and then the pressure to have kids. So let's assume that 50%, very conservative number, have kids. That's 15,000 of them. that's larger than the size of many agencies, shutting down, and so what they found is there's analytics, HR analytics, which kicks in here and starts tracking data that, when women join back after the maternity leave at 3 months, they find that, the propensity to drop out is extremely high. Now, you can use that data to analyze further what happens when I extend the leave to 4 months, what happens when I extend the leave to 4.5 months, and you see no impact in dropout rates. But when you extend to 5 months, you see the retention levels increase, and when you increase it to 6 months, you see the highest increase in retention levels. So it seems like a counterintuitive idea, but the same company goes, even before the government mandates it, and goes and extends the maternity leave to 6 months. That's an interesting use of big data and analytics to connect with stakeholders in a way that keeps their interests in mind, but it's a win-win for both. How can brands start using, data like that? That's
And therefore, it actually kind of creates a very strong employer brand.
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the story.
It's a story, and you're connecting with key stakeholders, and which is why I said, beyond the narrow confines of the brand, you're absolutely right. Employer brand, large amounts of stakeholder. How do you engage with them? And it's, of course, this is not restricted to this brand because it creates word of mouth. It helps you look at your brand in the larger perspective. How do others view it? Potential employees.
Just to kind of interject, I've got a slightly, naughty, politically incorrect, thought process. So with all due apologies, I was wondering whether the pressure to have kids will increase that much when the in-laws come and say, "Hello, you've got 6 months leave now, so you better have a kid. No excuses. You have both 3 months and therefore you."
And now Zomato has given the paternity leave as well.
So the population explosion goes boom. What I hear is therefore, if I were to draw a metaphorical this thing, language is grammar, which is what big data is. It gives us, very, very specific architectural kind of a thing. Whereas literature is all about the sense of engagement. So we all learn grammar, language, etc., and then we get introduced to literature. So in a way, if I were to say big data and small data, one is the language, the grammar, the other one is the empathy quotient that comes in. There was another question that I think Sujit posed and addressed to you, but I think all of us should be able to. If Excite Freedom had to be launched today, how would they do it differently?
So, okay, I'm going to answer that in a slightly broader perspective. If you look at businesses, what is the biggest challenge today? The biggest challenge is how do I find a way to differentiate my brand compared to the other one? Just take mobile phones for example. We don't even know the number of mobile phone brands which exist, right? But if you ask someone which is a mobile phone you want to buy, they will either say OnePlus or they will say iPhone or they will say Samsung. But the fact is that there are at least 30 mobile phone brands or even more which exist in the marketplace. And it goes back to understanding that finally differentiation happens here, which means that the brand has to be rooted in an idea, and that idea should own the mind, right? If the idea owns the mind, then there is no space for any other brand. Like ideally, the best place to be in is to be in a category of one, right? Apple is in a category of one. There is really no competitor to Apple because it's a completely different ecosystem that they operate. Now, how do you create that category of one? In the olden days, which is when we all guys got into the business, communication perhaps was the only way that you could enter the mind. Today it's not the only way, right? It is multi-sensory. I can create an environment where I can experience the brand. And I'll give an example. If you take a brand like Royal Enfield, right? What is the chance of a technology which was born in the 1950s, hasn't changed much, looks the same, sounds the same, but it has kind of become a cult brand, right? Because the experience of Royal Enfield is not the bike. The experience of Royal Enfield is the experience that you will have when you hit the trail, right? It is just a sort of vehicle through which you can actually experience freedom, right? That's what they've created. So, for example, if you take, we don't get to see these things in media, but if you actually go and talk to these Royal Enfield people, you'll suddenly find that there's a group called RED. RED is a short form of Royal Enfield Devil, right? Exactly the same way like Harley Davidson has Hogs, Harley Davidson Owners Group. If you go to, for example, you go to Goa and you find there is a Royal Enfield cafe, right? Where you can actually experience the brand. If you go to at the corner of Brigade Road, you've got Samsung, which is a theatre,
Yes.
right? So what is happening is brands are moving away, not away, they're kind of expanding their footprint from a TV ad to a theatre of experiences, right? And that is what is helping, brands to differentiate. Is differentiation in the mind. That my multisensory experience of the brand is so different from the experience of anything else that exists in the category, right? So if I were to launch Excite Freedom, for example, today, I think Excite Freedom was launched at a point in time when the idea was at least 15 years ahead of its time,
Yeah.
right? It was basically a maintenance-free battery, right? And if something happened to the battery within the warranty period, it would change. I would say Excite Freedom means you don't even own the battery. You don't even own the battery. And I'll give you a wonderful example of this. In the early 80s, when Bombay had these Chotu, Fiat cabs, no cab owned a battery.
I didn't know this. Wow.
No cab owned a battery. They would hire the battery on a daily lease of 5 rupees. Right? Because these were all reconditioned batteries. And the advantage was if something happened, they didn't have to buy a new one. They would just go to the guy and change the battery. So every day he would go and pay 5 rupees to the fellow who gave him the battery. Right? That fellow was a battery reconditioning guy. Okay? In fact, one of the reasons why Excite Freedom was launched was it was a polypropylene battery which you could not recondition. But look at the idea. The same idea has now come back in electric vehicles. Right? I mean, I am part of the largest electric vehicle fleet company in the world today. We don't own any battery. We own the car. The battery is owned by Mahindra. Right? I don't have to worry about, if it, runs out, what is going to happen, none of those things. So that is real freedom. So I would actually launch Excite Freedom to answer Sujit's question, where you never had to even buy the battery.
So Sujit, you thought that you trapped SU with this. Sorry, try again.
And I think another take on this, which is if you look at how batteries are sold today, it's a very, very, very low involvement category that most people don't really care about. Yeah. If you see who influences that decision, it's the guy who's installing it for you. So a company we worked with looked at this and they said, it has low shelf life. It's sold through small little garages and mechanics, across the country. How do we actually influence the sale of our brand? How do we get people to, recommend it to a customer? So they actually took the digital approach where they looked at, how do we first get data on this? How do we know who has how many batteries? How do we know who's selling our battery? And they actually work with digital mechanisms like barcodes, with so their sales representatives have an app. They work on a whole platform for gamifying that app where there was a reward system. All so that they could motivate their sales force to go out into the field to sell these batteries and then use the barcodes to register who's selling it, incentivize their sale over competition, and basically use, their campaign was with their sales force. It wasn't with the end customer. It was rooted in that, and that's how they're actually, going out and selling batteries.
Another very interesting thought that comes to my mind. Here you're talking about that none of these taxi drivers owned battery. Today, the big talk is that ownership of properties or material goods will, kind of vanish because everybody can go and lease hire or whatever. And what I see therefore, it's not a new concept. It's been there. It's just the way it's being done possibly is a lot more organized and a little more fashionable to be part of that. Let me come to another point, which is the funnel. Now, we kind of have this discussion basically around the digital system platform, but there are so many, and the experiential touch points has become so wide and varied that the role of the funnel, and we often forget that, let's say, what a print ad can do or ought to do is very different from when you are at the store. The kind of information that we seek. And I find that most of the digital advertising, possibly I'm part of that 73, including, if you include me, it possibly would go up to 90%. Why people get, because when I am trying to read, let's say, a content which has come in from McKinsey or a joke which has come in from one of my friends, and over the suddenly, a pop-up which comes on my face then that, Bali holiday, etc., it's very aggravating because that is not the point where I'm seeking a particular kind of information which is being thrown at me. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to master that despite all the technology and the big data, etc., that what the appropriateness of a particular messaging in a particular platform. So the funnel becomes, understanding the funnel, obviously it has undergone a paradigm shift from, let's say, 20 years ago. So how would you look at it?
See, I'd say the example you're giving would traditionally be considered bad advertising. It's the wrong message to the wrong person on the wrong medium.
Absolutely.
That's all it is. There are very good campaigns that have been run where someone's really an article and this is either related to this or this is something that I'm searching for at this moment. I might not be doing it right now, but it's something that I searched for 5 minutes ago, where it does lead to massive gains in terms of conversions and sales.
Let me just expand on what you said. See, we are talking about big data, so let me tell you this on this example. You would not be served that ad until and unless you had shown some inclination of going for a holiday.
Yeah.
Right? That is how
Big brother.
that is how money is optimized on this kind of media. Point number one. Point number two is that they would have found the correlation between holiday and some other keywords that you're using to search, right? Which means it will make it even more sharper. At what time to serve it will also depend on, are you doing a leisurely search or are you doing a purposed search, right? They will have data and this is all real time. They will have data where you're jumping from, you're like a monkey jumping from one tree to the other. Then they know that you've got a lot of time and you're spending time on all kinds of other things, and they will also pick up what are those stray interests that you've got. Versus something that you're searching very purposefully, they will not serve you the ad there. Whether they will serve you the ad there or not is a decision that you can take. So what the data will give you is your behavior in context, in affinity. Like what are your affinities, right? So I'll get context, I'll get affinity, I'll get time, I'll get all that. That is what big data gives you. Okay, so I'll just give you a parallel to this. There used to be something called media planning, right? And we used to do media planning manually. We had Agostini's formula and Querel's formula, basically to figure out what should be the number of ads that should be served in this media. We had, mind you had a 10-minute window. 10 minutes is all the time that you got, when you would read the newspaper, right? In that 10-minute window, how many times should that ad appear? Today, the consumer is on the medium all the time, right? Your sleep time has gone down. You're spending far more time on your mobile phone, number one. Number two is, there is a brain activity which all of us suffer from, which has got to do with the fact that if I put a post on WhatsApp or on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever, where if there is no response, I am under stress, which is I can measure it in the blood, which is cortisol response. But if somebody likes it and gives me a positive response, then I get exactly the opposite response, which is an endorphin response, right? And because I get that response, I want to do it more because I love that. It's like an opioid, right? Which basically means that this kind of stuff is actually increasing your interactivity time with the medium. While you're on that medium, Google, Amazon, because Amazon is also a search engine, Flipkart is also a search engine. They are picking up tons and tons of data on you. Question is, how will you use the data?
So, the problem is that while the data to target somebody has increased exponentially, the storytelling method to speak to that person has still remained the same. So I'm still sending you an ad saying, would you like to go to Bali? I'm not curating for you an experience of Bali.
Absolutely.
I'm not sending you a video about the best undiscovered or lesser known rock band in Bali, which is for a great evening. My story is not about the greatest tourist experience that somebody has captured in a blog post, which if I share with you, you will love to book tickets in the next 1 hour and recreate that experience for you. But I'm not sending you a link to that blog post. My storytelling device has remained an irritating ad that says 15% off on the tickets to Bali, while data has increased exponentially. And that's the problem.
In fact, if the correct way to do it is if, say, we were all looking for, how do we get to Bali and what's the best deal we should get. There should be, the same company should have a different ad for you, a different ad for ST, a different ad for me, a different ad. Because that's possible.
Yeah, and ad about food in Bali for me, not about 15% off, because I don't mind paying 15% more if you speak to me through the lens of food. So that's not happening, and therefore, data provides a lot of answers. But I have a very strong view on this, that the answer economy is dead. There was a time when there was a market for answers. A company called Britannica's Encyclopedia. Dead. We used to have collections in middle class homes called Tell Me Why. Kept in showcase.
Monotosh.
They're all dead. Because answers are going for free on Wikipedia, on Google, on Quora from experts, without having to type in on Alexa. If you can ask me a question that has never been asked before, that's where innovation comes from. So we have to, the data will provide you all the touch points. The question we have to ask ourselves is, what are we doing with our storytelling? Is it still stuck there? And therefore, to me, the answer lies in using both the data for targeting, understanding patterns, who's interested in going to Bali, and then for some intervention to come in, for some thinking to come in, where we say, how do we now, make the story appealing to you? And the answer for that may not be 15% off. The answer for that may be a food blog, maybe a rock band, maybe the best cycling trail, which may excite you and say, this is the 35-kilometer cycling trail from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock that will create memories for a lifetime. Now, so the answer lies in asking the right questions and stepping back. I remember the largest NGO in Dhaka is an NGO called BRAC. It's not just in Dhaka, but it's the largest NGO in the world. The story that still sort of, I have not been able to take it out of my head, it stayed with me is, there's all this data that you use for microfinance, that, they work in microfinance, they work in lending, they work in... One of the most powerful stories that came out was from the simple act of asking a good question. When a senior person from back, when visiting the slums, asked a young girl, what would you like to be when you grow up, beta? And she said, I'd like to be a television. So she said, why? And she said that the child replies, in our house, the television, when it is on, everybody looks at it, everybody listens to it. Beautiful. And it's kept clean. Look at my dirty clothes. Now, that act of empathy, if we can use all the data to connect better, but use questions to dig deeper and find the stories that then I can use to reach out to investors, to donors in the right way, with the right stories. Then, otherwise, I'll have the same sort of fundraising campaign that has been running, with a photograph of a child, 15-year-old child needs your help, send $700, it costs only this much. For the cost of a coffee, you can send a kid to a school. Diminishing returns are kicked in. We've been saying the same thing. So there's diminishing returns which is kicking in on storytelling of a certain kind. And that's what we need to reevaluate.
I think what we'll do is one more point and then we'll try and wrap up. Very, very interesting, this thing. And therefore it brings me to a slightly, I'll take a bit of leap in the logic to and especially for someone like you who deals with live audience, and therefore the custom, the bespoke kind of a quality does not kick in when you're talking to a room of 25 or 500 people, whereas on a digital maybe it's feasible. So we have this, millennial, the generation millennial, or the generation Gen Z, or the Zennials, etc., and how disparate they are, etc., etc. My personal experience is that older we get, the younger we want to stay. And therefore, in a way, possibly, we adopt technology out of necessity, out of whatever, desire to be young, etc. And therefore, also get influenced with a lot of Gen Z attitudes, etc., etc. In your experience, I mean, you must be speaking in the same forum to a diverse range of audience. How do you kind of weave your story that appeals to everybody? I mean, one is obviously said get down to the core and universal.
That remains, the universal truth remains, it's almost like the poet who writes a poem that's deeply personal. But a good poet will be able to remove the fluff and go so deep to the essence of that pain or anguish or love or frustration that you're expressing to that it becomes universal.
No, the other thing is, one is the content, the other is the form. Let's say in the last 5 years, and I'm taking a 5-year, not even a 10-year kind of thing, the last 3 to 5 years, how have you seen your storytelling style evolving or changing to suit the kind of expectations or the interest level of?
The more and more stripped down, one short answer, stripped down of everything else. So just like the unplugged version of music, the unplugged version of people want authenticity, right? Increasingly, you're not even buying tables which are perfect laminate. Increasingly we want trousers with holes in it. We want tables which have got rough edges, and it looks like a 15-year-old used table. In a story, I don't want the perfect experience of theatre or orchestra or even the Prithvi stage. I want rawness of when somebody sings. I don't want a classically trained singer, but I want an actor who can sing. I want a storyteller who can tell a story, not through just persona, but or putting on an act, but somebody who feels the pain and cries. That's while telling the story, because he or she feels the pain of that.
I'd like to add a little just to what Amin was talking about universal and this whole universal bit. So when I used to work on Procter & Gamble from the agency side many moons ago, they used to have this little one-liner which they used to use for developing of communication, and they used to call it search and reapply. See what is happening. I mean, see within the Procter & Gamble umbrella, see what is happening and see what would work for your country. Right? So often it sounds like, why the hell should we do that? We should, develop content, afresh. So it again came down to the universal. I believe Procter & Gamble is one of the companies which really knows how to, understand the mind of the consumer and insights. And it really came down to universal values which across the globe would apply. A couple of examples, at that point in time, a little later that happened is, one of them is, I think I must be familiar with, is for Pantene. They had this thing about don't be sorry, about women. I don't know if you have seen the communication, but we as women, it's just a habit. We'll enter a conference room, sorry, do we do this? You'll brush against something, sorry. You'll enter an elevator, sorry. Sorry, do you know where this is kept? So we as women have this habit of we are constantly saying sorry for no reason. There's absolutely no reason. For example, this is something which is universal across the globe. Women can identify with this. Yeah, we do this. This is something that we really do. But another idea which they got for the always sanitary napkin ad, which is like a girl. Which is another, so the point I'm making, even like a girl, is a very deprecatory, condescending, stop behaving like a girl, stop running like a girl, stop crying like a girl, where it was turned on its head. So the point I'm trying to make through these examples is that these are universal truths, these are universal values, core values. Take it across the globe, take it across the masses, it's going to hold true.
Yeah, what people keep on saying is changing values. For me, and correct me if you all disagree, values don't change, they're eternal. Right. What changes is the way we behavior, I mean the attitude, the behavior aspect of the value. Obviously, I mean, when my grandfather was alive, possibly my father never sat in front of him. I always used to stand up till the elders in my family were sitting in a room. Then my kids, they don't even get up here. I mean, they've taken my spot on the couch and say, "What's up, Pop?" with their feet on the beanbag. But you never feel a lack of respect or love. So yeah, it's
The
lovely.
way of expressing it is,
Yeah.
perhaps.
So, if we can now kind of tie it all down, what was the, small data, big insights, how do big ideas work in an analytics-driven world? So if we kind of started with recencies being the most, reticent of the lot, can you just tie up your thoughts? If there is one particular, and I'll sound like a typical anchor, and the nation wants to know your final thoughts.
I think the major takeaway is that the game hasn't really changed. The way we're playing it, or the strategy to play it, has changed a bit, and we need to kind of adapt to that. It's like if I use a basketball analogy, the three-pointer wasn't a big part of the game. There was a three-pointer, we were playing the game, there were threes being shot, but it wasn't. It was mostly a big man post game where you played inside out. Now suddenly it's all about the three-pointer, and teams have evolved to, adapt to that system, and they've gotten better, and the game has gotten faster. It's more exciting because of it. And that's kind of what's happened here is we've always had data, we've always had how do you apply that data to ideas. It's just that now there is more data, it's getting richer, it's getting more prevalent, and as creative people we kind of need to adapt to it, start seeing how can we use it in more creative ways, how can we use the data to be creative, and take it from there. And it's just going to evolve and keep getting more and more.
Great. Nandita, your...
A couple of thoughts. One thought is obvious, that is, if there is a logical solution to whatever the brand or client problem is, chances are that somebody's found it. So, so that is one part of it. So that is where, the other bits come in. Second thing is, like we were talking earlier, the second takeaway for me is about big idea. Don't look for big ideas and put the pressure on the agency. It can come from anywhere. It could be in your product. It could be out in the, distribution. It could be just about anywhere. The typical thing to do is product is not selling, advertising. What is the big idea? So this big idea is a very, very strong term, which is sometimes taken out of context. It could be anywhere in your chain. And you must have an open mind and know that with the amount of big data and small data that we have accessible to us, we should utilize it to figure out where the big idea actually is.
I'll try and sort of do this in a story way. So let me tell a story. And the preface to that story is that, McCann used to have, I'm sure many people will remember, truth well told, right? Truth is the data, the well told is the story, right? And, good communication, good storytelling is nothing but truth. It needs to be authentic, it needs to be based on data, universal truth, insight, and we have a lot of that today, truth. But truth alone doesn't sell, right? It needs to be well told, and that is the storytelling, and that storytelling needs to evolve. So a story that comes to my mind is that a long time ago, there was this old man. He had an interesting jacket, a lot of patches on the jacket. Wherever this old man would go, people would invite the old man in and say, "Hey, old man, come, please have tea and cake with us. Hey, old man, please come have wine and cheese with us." Everybody liked the old man. At the same time in the world, there was a lady. Wherever she would go, people would shut their doors and windows, nobody wanted to see her. The lady obviously gets very upset, goes to the old man and says, "Who are you? Why is it that people love you? What is it that, why do this?" So the old man turns and asks her, "Who are you? Why don't you tell me who you are?" And the lady says, "I'm truth." Now, nobody can handle the truth. The old man said, "I'm story." So the lady was not willing to take that challenge lying down. What she does is, she removes all her clothes and says, "Now at least people will find me attractive." But when she removes her clothes, people start running away because you see nobody can handle the naked truth. Data without stringing it together is just like that. So, but the old man had the wisdom to know that the world needs the truth and it can help the world. So he said, "Why don't you come along with me? I've got much more wine and cheese and tea and cake than I need for myself. So why don't you just come along with me?" So truth jumped into story's pocket, and from then it is said that wherever story goes, you can find the truth.
Beautiful. SG, topic.
So, see, I think there are two, three important things that we discussed. One is availability of technology. Technology is like overpowering everything else. And it is going to continue in this way because we have still not seen IoT coming in. Because everything in our lives will be connected with each other and we are going to live in a connected economy all the time. And the amount of data that you are seeing today, it is actually going to multiply in many ways. Second thing is, do we know how? So like Amin said, data is truth. The fact that you went to Pornhub and watched some porn movie is truth. Like you might say, no, I didn't do that. No, but that's the truth, right? The fact that you went and checked out a cycle which costs that kind of money is the truth. The fact that you are looking at MG Hector and saying ye internet car kya hai, that is the truth. So you will all the time find the truth. And like Amin said, can you convert truth into a story? Like truth is unpalatable many a times, but a story is what we learn everything through stories. Like we don't learn the truth. If I ask you what is Newton's second law of thermodynamics, can you say? You can't. But if I ask you, can you tell me how Newton discovered the law of gravity? You will tell me the truth of the story about the apple falling, right? People don't know. If I ask you what is Archimedes' equation, you won't be able to tell me. But you'll be able to tell me that he was floating in the tub when he suddenly jumped out, went around naked and said, Eureka, Eureka. The truth really is from in our business is I think advertising agencies and the communication guys are stuck in a time warp. And the reason I'm saying they are stuck in a time warp is we are stuck in formats. We are stuck in these ideas of winning awards. These are the naked truths about agencies, since I deal with them on a daily basis. They do not have the structure, they do not have the quality of people that is required to refresh stories all the time. Our stories are getting refreshed all the time. You look at your WhatsApp in the morning and you look at the WhatsApp in the evening.
Oh, yes.
The same thread would have been refreshed some 5 times, right? You were talking about old people wanting to be younger, which is why Facebook has become basically a geriatric ward, right? All the young people have left Facebook and they have gone to Snapchat and Instagram and people stuff like that. We are the guys hanging around, right? So that's the fact. But the truth remains that if I am on Facebook and you want to attract me, you can't just give me, one position, proposition, reason why kind of stuff. You have to give me an incident that happened that evoked an emotion in your life, because what we remember as memories are nothing else than emotion. If I ask you what is 17 into 35, you won't be able to tell me. But if I ask you who was the best teacher in your school, right? Because you have a relationship, right? I think the real gap is that we do not have the ability to take the truth and convert them into interesting anecdotes, interesting stories, interesting experiences that the consumer has. Which is one of the reasons why many clients are now having the communication part integrated into their operations. Right?
Yes, yes.
And the agencies are getting left behind. I mean, you look at the agency structures, they're all falling apart. Right? So that's one aspect. The second aspect is, where are the storytellers? Who is the next Piyush Pandey? Who is the next Prasoon Joshi? Who is the next, Balki? Who is the next Alec Padamsi? Right? Where are the great storytellers? Right?
Our films actually.
Our business is all about telling great stories. Right? Are we willing to pay for such people? What differentiates one brand from another brand is one brand. Why do so many people, think Steve Jobs is like God? Basically, you are the best storyteller in the world of business, right?
He didn't create anything.
Elon Musk is one of the best storytellers in the business. Richard Branson is one of the best storytellers in a business. So one is, where are the storytellers? Two, where are the companies which believe in stories? Companies are far more comfortable with right brain stuff, which is let's put out the data, let's put out the information. We don't like information. We don't like information. The human brain has not evolved to like information, right? So that's the second part, that where are the story? And third is, do we really understand the data? Because we have all grown up working on unidimensional data. Now I have to merge 3 different data streams and then understand the behavior, because behavior is not based on one dimension. Amin behaves in a certain way at some point of time in the day when he is in the company of friends and they are discussing stuff which has to do with politics, right? And then you are serving him an ad which has to do with Bali. You know, what shit is this, right? I don't think we understand that. I don't think we understand, multidimensional data and scaling, right? Then how do you take this and then really scale it up? We don't have that. Big problem in today's world is not having the expertise to interpret the data. As a result of which, what is happening is, Google themselves are doing the ads, right? You go to Amazon, Amazon will create the ad for you, right? So my question is, not having such people is resulting in one dangerous thing, which is the guys who own the data are shaping your destiny. The guys who own the data are shaping your destiny, right?
Okay, folks, I think, we've kind of crossed the 1 hour limit, but it's been very engaging for me. I hope it's been similar for you. Before we wrap up, there are 3 names that I would like to acknowledge, besides who have given their time for this particular discussion and the viewers who have logged in. One is, of course, Sujit, for goading us and, threatening us to host this. So thank you for that. Reese. This entire setup has been coordinated and managed by Reese. And then the last one, Ashna. If you look at the post on Facebook, that drew you to log in for this, the creative has been done by Ashna. So thank you once again, Ashna, for doing all this, giving us the support. And that's it. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.